celebration of Alabama State University and our inauguration on tomorrow. But before we go into all of that, I think it's so important that we set the stage for who we are and what we do as historically black colleges and universities. And no better group than to discuss that than those who are presidents of historically black colleges and universities. And I'm so grateful that my friends are here today to share in this discussion. I thank you for coming this morning to be involved in the discussion. And so I'm not going to delay us any further. We know Dr. French is stuck in traffic. So yes, you see an empty chair, but you know how that Birmingham traffic, trying to get here. So as soon as he arrives, he will join us on stage. And so to take us through our discussion this morning, we have brought one who is an exemplar for academic achievement. Vanzetta Penn McPherson retired as a U.S. Magistrate Judge for the Middle District of Alabama in 2006 after 15 years on the federal bench. Judge McPherson is a native of Montgomery who experienced nursery school, kindergarten through 12th grade as a student on this campus at what was then known as Alabama State College Laboratory School. In 2015, she and her high school classmates will celebrate the 50th anniversary of their graduation. Judge McPherson graduated cum laude in 1969 from Howard University, and she received her MA degree in 1971 and her law degree in '74 from Columbia University. In addition to her keen interest in HBCUs, Judge McPherson is a columnist for the Montgomery Advertiser and is active in Montgomery's art and civic communities. She is married to Thomas McPherson, a graduate of Morris Brown College and the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta. All 4 of their children are Howard University graduates. I give you our moderator, Judge Vanzetta Penn McPherson.
Hear me a little better? Good. Thank you, Dr. Boyd, for the introduction. Welcome to all of you. This is a significant part of this momentous occasion this week. We are glad that you could join us. Above all, thank you on behalf of Alabama State University to the presidents who have joined us. As Dr. Boyd indicated, there is no better source for information and perspective on these issues than HBCU presidents themselves. And we have a distinguished group of presidents with us. As she stated, the president of Miles College is not here yet, but we hope that he will arrive shortly. So I will begin by introducing the speakers, and to avoid any appearance of impropriety, instead of starting at the far end, where I am intuitively inclined to start, I will start at the near end. With us today is Dr. Glenda Baskin-Glover. Dr. Glover joins Dr. Boyd in a way as a female president of an HBCU. You are you not, Dr. Glover, Tennessee State's first? Yes. Dr. Glover Dr. Glover brings a wealth of experience, and that is not a cliche. She truly brings a wealth of experience. Dr. French, would you join us, please, on the podium? To the presidency of Tennessee State. She is a graduate of Tennessee State University, and after graduating with a Bachelor of Science degree, she pursued a Master of Business Administration in Clark Atlanta University. She completed her doctorate in business from George Washington University, and later completed her law degree from Georgetown University. Dr. Glover served prior to assuming the presidency at Tennessee State as chairperson of the Department of Accounting at Howard University. She also was an administrator at Jackson State University. She has been a corporate board member of 3 publicly traded corporations. She is the author of more than 100 articles and papers and is regarded as one of the nation's experts on corporate governance. Seated next to Dr. Glover is Dr. William B. Bynum, who is president of Mississippi Valley State University. Dr. Bynum is one of the new presidents as well. We have only one president on our panel who has been a president of a university longer than 22 months. Dr. Bynum was appointed as president of Mississippi Valley State University on October 8, 2013. He is a native of Rocky Mount, North Carolina. He also is the only panel member who is not a graduate of an HBCU, so his perspective will be useful in that regard. He holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Davidson College, and both a master's degree and a doctorate in sociology from Duke University, where he was a Duke Endowment Fellow. He has served as a distinguished professor of sociology at Davidson, an associate vice president of student affairs and dean of students at Clark Atlanta University, and assistant dean of students at Davidson College. He therefore joins Dr. Glover as a person of immense experience in higher education and specifically at HBCUs. We are pleased to have Dr. Bynum join us. Seated next to him is President George T. French of Miles College, our neighbor to the north. As I said, Dr. French is our experienced panel member today, having served at Miles for 14 years. Dr. French has been instrumental, and this is really important, instrumental in doubling the size of the Miles campus. Miles recently acquired 41 acres adjacent to its existing campus, and he has led that institution through that acquisition. Seated next to Dr. French, as you can see for yourself, is a person who was born in the year that I entered law school. Dr. Wayne Frederick is the newly appointed president of Howard University. He was appointed on July 21st, 2014. He had served as interim president of Howard since October 1st of 2013. Dr. Frederick was born in Port of Spain, Trinidad. He is a scholar, surgeon, researcher, and respected administrator. And given my experience at Howard, even though it's dated at this point, it's refreshing to have someone who is a surgeon who knows something about physical ails as president of the university. Much needed. Prior to coming to Howard as its interim president, he was associate director of the Carol and Ray, am I pronouncing it correctly, Naig Comprehensive Care Center, director of surgical oncology, and an assistant professor in the Department of Surgery at the University of Connecticut. He has also held several leadership positions, including associate dean in the College of Medicine, division chief of the Department of Surgery, and director of the Cancer Center and deputy provost for health sciences. He too brings a wealth of experience in higher education and specifically in administration at HBCUs. You have come today to hear some very useful perspectives on HBCUs. So first, let me take a bit of the temperature of the audience. Please raise your hand if you are a graduate of an HBCUs, just so that we know the audience that we are speaking to. Raise your hand if you are a faculty member at an HBCU or a previous faculty member. Okay. Thank you. So this session will be a series of questions and perspectives in the form of answers from the panel members. I'm not going to call on anybody. I won't presume to do that with college and university presidents before me, but I will pose the question and allow the panelists to answer as they choose to do so. I will warn them I am not going to use the order listed in the questions that you have. The first first one is, what is the value of balancing the very delicate interests, on the one hand, of providing a premier university education to students at HBCUs, while on the other hand, infusing some and reinforcing in others a knowledge and appreciation of African American culture and history? 3, 2, 1. Dr. French? Given the fact that HBCUs do have a peculiar, and I don't mean it strange, but a peculiar in that it is a very niche-driven role in educating university students, what's the value of integrating those two things? And how do HBCUs do it? And for that matter, why do they do it?
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam President, congratulations. Indeed, the HBCUs in our nation have a unique role to play, and more than ever, Judge, I think that we have to find our niche. I think at one time it was a privilege, if you would, to have a niche. But I think in order to survive now, we have to have our particular niches. When I look at Alabama State University and the fact that they are focusing on the STEM disciplines, I think it's very important. When I look at our institution, we're focusing on internationalization, on globalization. Very, very important. I think in order to continue to not just survive, but to thrive, we have to find those unique, our unique niche. Ours, again, is in internationalization and globalization, and that's almost out of necessity, because we realize that we live truly in a global society, and we realize that as an institution with a Center of Academic Excellence from the Director of National Intelligence, we have to help our nation with the war on terrorism. We're doing so through research, we're doing so through the teaching of Arabic, Urdu, and Farsi, and with partnerships directly with intelligence agencies. So we have students who go directly into intelligence agencies, one of the 16 or 17 intelligence agencies, and they travel around the world because our nation has a need for intelligence. Of course, we know we found ourselves in the midst of a war in the Middle East, which we never found weapons of mass destruction, but we never had adequate intelligence. But the bottom line is we didn't have people that looked like the residents of that region. And as we find ourselves at the proliferation of conflicts throughout Africa, we're going to have people that look like us to go into Africa to get that intelligence.
Thank you. Dr. Glover, you look poised.
Good morning. And thank you. And President Boyd, my sincerest congratulations. I think we're all developing our niche as we go along. But the issue is whether or not we're going to continue to produce competitive students who can manage in a global marketplace, who can take advantage of the opportunities that are available and understand the challenges and how we fit into those challenges. For example, there's never been a time in this century where African Americans and HBCUs are more needed. I mean, you have to depend on us because of how the numbers are shaping out. In the year 2023, we're going to be the majority of population in schools, in all the schools. And in 30 years later, the minorities will be the majority. So we're poised to be the leaders of everything because that's how the numbers will shape out. If you look at some of the big issues that are facing America, one is really overlooked, like food security. We had to produce as much food in 2015, 10 times as much as we did in this year, 2014, because of how the numbers are shaping out around the world. And then the public-private partnerships. No longer can we depend on just the state to support HBCUs. That day is gone. I think last year, Tennessee State received 28% from the state of Tennessee. So you're no longer state supported. You're a state assisted, but not state support. So we have to understand that there's a new paradigm when it comes to HBCUs. And we still face it. We still face the same level of, I know they're taping me, so I won't say discrimination on that. They're putting me in the paper. I'll be in the paper in Nashville. But the same levels of unequal access to various aspects of society. So we have to make sure the role keeps evolving into something greater and greater, because that's what the demand will be. And the poverty issues, the educational issues, the wealth issues, the fact that Black America lost 60% of their wealth during the last depression. Those are the issues we must be on the front lines and tell and have the education and educate our students to make sure they're educating others about where we really stand. So we can't walk in the door of a big corporation with a briefcase and think we're there. You know, that day is over. We have to make sure we know who we are and what we're tackling these days.
Well, I'm glad that you're making that point, because in the midst of the pressures that you've identified, the crises in funding, the differences in the way that HBCUs thrive, financially and otherwise, what is the real value of assuring cultural reinforcement among African American students at HBCUs, or any student at an HBCU? If you agree, why should that be a role of the university?
Well, that's one of the foundations of HBCU. It was founded to, I guess, to educate the newly freed slaves, most of us. But by the time TSU was founded in the early 1900s, it was to bring to deposit to society a different class of African Americans, those who were the descendants, direct descendants of the newly freed slaves, and that, you know, you could be competitive, you could go and do all that anybody else was doing. But the value lies in how we treat, how we train the alumni, how we, the traditions, how we honor our traditions, how we educate our own students, how we tell about the value of being an HBCU, what you get, the nourishment, what you get from being an HBCU. I think the value issue has to be taught from the very first day that a student arrives on the campus, to know the pride, the honor of being. We just had what we call our induction ceremony. You get made a freshman. So you have the candlelight ceremony, and you understand the traditions of TSU, and understand why you're here, and what you're going to do when you leave here, and what your expectations. As you have 4 years. You know, some are a bit more comprehensive. Yeah, some do 5, 6, or 7, but we're looking at 4 years, and what you're going to do at the end of your 4 years. So that value proposition is going to just grow and grow, because that's what we expect. We put that value. When you said how many with HBCUs, their hands went up in pride with a smile. I saw nobody frowning, because that's the value added that you get from going to an HBCU.
You know, it's very interesting that we hear a lot of talk about HBCUs emphasizing cultural values and cultural reinforcement and history of African Americans. But seldom do we, in this analysis, and it's across the board, whether we're talking about educational institutions or other institutions, seldom do we flip the coin and pay attention to the fact that at majority white institutions, it is just as culturally based. It is just as culturally based. And as much as African Americans at HBCUs emphasize culture, their own culture, and their own history, institutions that are majority white tend to do the same thing. You might find a specific seminar, for example, at my alma mater, on just the poetry of African Americans, but similarly, you will find several seminars at majority white institutions on just the poetry of Chaucer. Dr. Frederick, do you think it amounts to the same thing?
Yeah, and again, first let me say thanks for the invitation, and I certainly extend my congratulations to Dr. Boyd as well as the other panelists. And Judge McPherson, unless you went to school in 1950, I think you went to school pretty early.
Howard Charles.
And, having said that, I'm the father of a 10 and an 8-year-old boy and girl. And I get into conversations with them on a very frequent basis where they learn about history in school, at home, on the television, and I listen to the questions that they also pose. And some of those conversations have really allowed me to step back from what we must do as a university and as an institution of higher education along the cultural issue. And I'll give you a couple examples. My son, who is 10 now, and I think this probably occurred when he was 6 or 7, was looking at the television one day, looking at CNN, and then turned to me and said, "Why did Mr. Obama mess up the economy?" And I said to him, "What are you talking about?" I was pretty vociferous in my defense of Mr. Obama, and as I was trying to defend him, I realized that the economy wasn't in the best place, and he was the president. And my son's intuition was that he was the president and he needed to fix the economy, period. The fact that he was African American or looked like him was not the issue. For him, the issue was that he was the president of the United States. My 2 kids will come of age and come to college and go to university, and the first time they see a white person in the White House as the president, that will be the first time they see that. It will be unusual for them. So let's think about that perspective. Think about the fact that they're going to grow up in a society where if there's a white president, they will look at that person unusual. They will ask the question, why is a white person in the White House? I mean, they may put I put it in that perspective because I think historically when we look at legacy and we think of African American culture and what our HBCUs were charged with doing then, we have to turn and pivot from that perspective and recognize that the perspective has to be based on something that is going to resonate with them. And that perspective has to be excellence. Regardless of what the niche is, we have to provide an excellent environment for education. If we do that, all of the other issues that we continue to discuss, whether it's finances, whether it's cultural competence, those things, the watermark will rise. But we must all focus on excellence. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is that we must teach that culture and the history because it is not intuitive for everyone to grasp. And when students do attend an HBCU, it is one of the responsibilities that we must carry on. You can't, so at our university we have a freshman experience. So our students will spend the entire first semester in a class where they learn about the African diaspora, they learn about slavery, they learn about civil rights. You think about what Howard contributed to Brown versus the Board of Education. The students who are coming in as freshmen, they don't know what that is about. We have to be purposeful in teaching it. Not so that they hold on to that legacy, but that they appreciate it and they build on it so that they recognize that the opportunities they have now did not come easy. And they have to have that appreciation, as well as they have to have the appreciation and responsibility that they must be excellent in order to preserve that legacy and to give it its just due as they go forward. And the third thing I would say is, in terms of teaching it culturally, we cannot look at our society today, we cannot look at what happens in Ferguson, Missouri, and as institutions of higher education not feel a sense of moral obligation to contribute to the solutions for that. And I think that's a big part of what HBCUs must do in terms of African American culture and in terms of teaching it. We have to make sure that young black men recognize that there are avenues for excellence that they can pursue. They don't have to all go to an HBCU. That's never going to be my argument. But we must be providing solutions within our institutions for the social ills in our society that may plague some of those areas. So you can't look at Ferguson, Missouri and not look at the employment disparity that was mentioned, the economic disparity in terms of opportunity, the public school system, All of those things are questions and that our institutions should be answering in our classrooms and our research laboratories. How do we close the disparities in health that decrease productivity? African American women with breast cancer are far more likely to die in Washington, D.C. than in any other state in our union. So just imagine, Mrs. Obama, just by changing the zip code from Chicago to D.C., has put us up in risk. That fact that in the most powerful city in the world, the fact that African American women are far more likely to die of breast cancer than any other state in this country says it all. Those disparities must be closed, and I think that's what our institutions must provide. Must provide an academic, intellectual environment that upholds our African American culture, but also provides solutions to the things that are occurring in our society in order for us to be relevant and to continue to be prosperous.
This question, the issue is on your list, but this question isn't on your list. I think it's important to follow through on what Dr. Frederick just said. You know, there is the whole Greek-Roman definition of university. And one of the perspectives that we think about when we say university is an institution that serves its community through research and through programs. How can HBCUs not only submit their significance and their role in their communities, but also advance their quest for excellence by serving their community? And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to be very specific here. There is an institution, a four-year institution here in Montgomery that has a programmatic niche of demography. It has essentially captured the market on demographic studies in Montgomery. They can tell you everything about every subgroup, and I'm speaking of Auburn University, Montgomery. Everything about every group, every little fact known, how many times the 5-year-olds go to the bathroom every day. I'm being facetious, but it is almost that distinct. 20 years ago, I had a conversation with the chair of whatever department criminal justice is in at ASU about an active research arm or an active community arm to study disparities in sentences between whites and African Americans in our local and state courts. Does the university, does the HBCU have any role in providing that kind of research and that kind of entree into community affairs? Can HBCUs be useful in giving us data and perspective in that regard, Dr. Bynum?
Thank you. And let me add my congratulations to Dr. Boyd. Great to be here. Lovely campus, awesome campus indeed. First and foremost, let me say that we have there's no doubt that HBCUs can contribute significantly to the research agenda. There's no doubt about it. The difference is what is happening with us with regards to HBCUs. We are lumping HBCUs together the way white people lump us together as black people. All right? One size does not fit all. And so what we're doing, I think, is unfortunately asking some HBCUs to take on a burden that others aren't prepared to. And so we need to look at HBCUs holistically like we do predominantly white institutions. Not all of us are going to be researchers. Not all of us are going to be Howard, and again, in terms of research, Tennessee State, Alabama State. Some of us, again, are going to be very specific, like Mississippi Valley State, in terms of the needs of the community. For instance, again, while Alabama State is concentrating on STEM majors and what needs to happen relative to STEM, Mississippi Valley State needs to concentrate on in terms of the social sciences. And again, putting teachers into the classroom so that, again, we correct some of the ills that are currently happening in our public school system. And so they're different. So again, it's what I want all of us to know, to look at really is that don't look at all HBCUs the same. There again, we are developing our own identities as we make our way just like other schools are. And it's important for us to recognize that that one size does not fit all. and not to look at every HBCU to cure every community ill, but to understand that there are certain niches and certain concentrations that all of us need to take on in order to further our community.
Thank you.
Just one comment about this. Our motto at Howard is in truth and service. And that service aspect is something that we feel strongly about. Our students participate in service. That's one of the biggest experiences you get at Howard University. And we tell students all the time, I say it all the time, that they're not coming to Howard to get a degree, they're coming to get an education. But that degree will only come alive when they give back to the community around them.
Speak to the difference, Dr. Frederick. That's an important statement. So please speak to the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. The technical competency that one will get at an institution is where we are going to compete. So we expect what happens in the classroom and research to be excellent. But the difference in getting an education is recognizing how that technical competence interacts with the society around you. It's very, very different. I did my cancer fellowship, my surgical oncology fellowship at MD Anderson Cancer Center. And I had an experience there that was unbelievable. The place is an absolutely unbelievable institution in terms of resources, etc. There's nothing that you could not get done at that place. There was a specific place that people only did biopsies on the breast. You could send a woman there that morning that you could see someone at 8:30, and by 8:45 they could have a biopsy, and that's how efficient it was. I then came to Howard, became the director of the cancer center. The first day I saw a woman like that. Although I had been at Howard before, I assumed that there was a biopsy place, and I called the nurse over, and same thing happened at the University of Connecticut, and I tried to send that patient to get that biopsy, and they informed me that that biopsy needed to be done by me, and it would have to be done next week. Very, very different circumstances. Still practicing the same medicine with the same principles, but in a different environment, and I think we have to recognize that, and that's why that service becomes important. When a woman comes into your office and tells you she cannot come and get her chemotherapy because she has 5 kids, she has to go to work. That's not something that you're going to get taught in a classroom, in a textbook. Somebody's not going to ask you the question, what do you do for the person who can't come to get chemotherapy because of their social circumstance? So the education that has to happen in an HBCU is important. How does that technical competence intersect with the society around you that you're trying to serve? And I think that's what you get as well from that education through the service aspect of what you get at HBCUs.
And we have a duty to steer students into areas where they can become meaningfully employed or become entrepreneurs. I mean, if the student comes and wants to just graduate, that doesn't help. I mean, you get a piece of paper, you can use your resume. But if you're in a non-meaningful area, and I don't define those because every area has some value. But if you know that the demand for one area is out there, and students shy away from it, you dumb yourself down just to graduate. I mean, that is deplorable. And so when I was dean of the College of Business at Jackson State, we made a point to tell students, well, here's what the employers are seeking. They're asking for accountants. They're asking for finance majors. They have some marketing jobs. But don't just say, I'm coming here and I want to get a degree in business and graduate. You are not educated because you graduated. I shake a lot of hands. I think we've had 3 commencements since I've been there. And once you shake all those hands, then you say, what are you going to do? Well, I went to placement, I'm still, what is your major? And then when they tell me major, you see I'm staying away from calling it in the areas of major. But we have to make sure we steer students to areas where we know they can be successful and can be employed. After taking all of their student loan debt and going through a 4 or 5 or whatever number of years they're there, it is our responsibility to assist them in getting into the right niche, the right marketplace for them.
Let's move to another issue. I mentioned before that only one of you has been president longer than 22 months, and I'm going to start with a veteran on the panel, Dr. French, with this question. The recent flurry of presidential exchanges on our campus I have a friend who calls it the carousel of presidents, which I thought was rather clever. How has, starting with you, Dr. French, how has the role of an HBCU president changed since you were in college? And how does being new on the job help an HBCU president exploit those changes?
How's it been new?
Well, how would you imagine? You're the veteran. How has the role of a president of an HBCU changed? And I'm talking about what I view as the old model of either a PhD or an EDD in education.
Well,
to something else like this.
Excellent question, because the role has changed. And when we look at the evolution of higher education, if we sit in the ivory tower and make the assumption that higher education has not changed, then we are destined for failure. When we consider that 50 years ago a president could sit with the administrative, at an HBCU 50 or 60 years ago, he could sit with his administrative cabinet and already have a captivated student population. If you lived in Birmingham, you were going to this school. If you lived in Montgomery, you were going to this HBCU. If you lived in Huntsville, you had your captivated student already there. You didn't have an option of going to Auburn or the University of Alabama or now the University of Phoenix online or Virginia College. Now you have so many options that you have to be very fluid in your approach to leadership and planning. You have to be very fluid when you see commercials, and we have to be very honest with our student populations and with our administrators to ask the question, well, how far is too far? I was watching television the other night, and I understand that first they say you can get your degree while you're sitting in your living room,
In your
and then while you have
in
on
your
your
pajamas.
And now they're out front with the hose, the water hose in their hands, saying you can get your degree while you wash your car. I say no. There's a point where no. At our institutions, you cannot get your degree while you wash your car. If that's what you want, go on to that institution. And we have to give that message. Yes, we are competitive. We are operating for competitive advantage, but there is a point where we value our education. How many of you all agree? Our members agree. Now, as much as you want to say about online education is well and fine, but how many of you all pledged online? There's an experience that you can only get by being on our campuses, and we have to embrace that experience, and we have to lift up. So Dr. McPherson, our role has changed. We have to become more advocates for higher education. We have to be fundraisers. We have to shape the vision. We have to care for our students, and that's what we have to be. We are hands-on presidents. We are hands-on. I was sitting in my cafeteria yesterday eating, and I saw a young man. You would have thought that he robbed a bank, but what did he do? He was walking across campus with his pants almost down to his knees. I had to go out there and stop that young man and talk to that young man and explain to him, we don't do SAG. We are the academicians. We are the scholars. We are intelligent. We are not prisoners. And that's where it all evolves from, being in prison where they couldn't trust you to have on a belt. They couldn't trust you with your own life. So I have to break all of that down. So our roles change, because we are not just the academicians leading the educational enterprise, but we have to be the nurturers, we have to be the fundraisers, we have to be the advocates in Washington, and on top of all of that, we have to sometimes catch hell from our board of trustees who don't understand what's going on.
I'm getting to that.
And let me add to what President Francis said. Again, he described very well the very different nature of the organization, and that's why the change. It is a completely different. The competitiveness that you have to be in order to attract students is significant, and so we have to be far more nimble than we once were. When when students didn't have a choice but to go to HBCUs, now they have a choice, and of course they're they're choosing to go elsewhere. And so therefore, the student desires, we have to be cognizant of student desires. Obviously, the way the kids are being raised today, students are different. So we have to look like those other institutions. That's why, again, seeing a beautiful campus like this, like Tennessee State, lets us know that we've got to be more competitive. We've got to provide for our students those things that they're going to expect in terms of amenities that they expect, in terms of food service, in terms of housing accommodations. We've got to be more nimble and look like those other institutions. The other part is that we've got to understand that we've got a completely different student now, today, in terms of what their expectations are now versus then. And one of the biggest ones, I'm a sociologist, so I always use this example. Back in the day, we ascribed status. We came into the classroom, almighty professor bestowed knowledge upon me. All right, dean meant something, president meant something, vice president meant something. Today, our students are not necessarily different. And let me get this very clear. I'm not making this is not a hit on our students, okay? It's not a hit on our students at all. This is just talking about the different nature. Nowadays, again, they expect us to achieve status. All right, so it's now going into the classroom and saying, okay, what are you going to do, professor, to keep my interest or to get my interest? And so if we don't change and adapt, what happens is if we want to continue to lecture that student, we're not going to reach that student. And so we've got to change the way we teach and the way we engage that student, because the ultimate, we still got to get to the ultimate gold mine. But if we're going to be stuck in our own ways and say, well, I'm not going to use technology, I'm not going to use other types of media in the classroom in order to get that message to the student, then again, we're going to lose that student, and we're not going to be as competitive. And so it's important for us to know that the reason HBCUs have changed because the nature of the student has changed, and the nature of the organization, the competitors have changed. We've got to be very nimble too, in order to make sure that our institutions, as George said, not just survive, but that we get to a method where we thrive.
Let me follow up a little too. A student came to me one day and said, President Glover, are you aware that Professor X didn't show up until maybe 25, 30 minutes late to class? And I said, no, I'm not aware of that, but thank you for bringing it to my attention. So I was escorting, well, it was actually two, escorting them out. They said, well, we don't think we got our money's worth today. I said, we're not going to ask for a refund. So I said, well, you're right. If a teacher doesn't come to class prepared, you are not getting your money's worth. So we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen on this campus. You see, the students, when the person got there, they came in complaining about how tired they were. Just things that were totally inappropriate. So, we tolerate a lot on campus. Right? When students bring it to our attention, then we have to act on that and understand that I know sometimes we have bad days, bad nights, whatever, but don't take that on the students. They're here for a different reason. They're not here to be social workers and understand what your problems are in your home. That's not the role of the student. But now, having said that, to answer your question more specifically, as the second longest serving president on this campus, I think we have to focus on management of universities. I come from the school of being a CPA and being a lawyer. So I understand those numbers, and I know that from being an auditor, we don't fail audits from misappropriation like most people think. We fail audits because we don't read, and we don't understand the policies of what's expected and what's allowed by the state and the various boards. We don't understand what we're supposed to be doing based on the rules. So we have to read those rules. I mean, we have to say, there have been times, even in my prior job, where we had to drill down. You can see, we can't use money in this way. Or if you're looking at Title III, no, that's inappropriate. Or if you got a federal grant, you have to look at every word to understand that you can't do it this way and expect to stay out of the papers. So we have to make sure we understand that first. And then we have to know that everybody on your staff have to do their job, do their part. When I first got to TSU, they asked me, are you going to fire everybody now that you're here? So I said, the basis for that question is not whether you're going to get fired, but it's an accountability question. And yes, you will be held accountable. And if you do your job, you can longevity. You know, don't you ever had this course? You can be here. And he said, well, I'm interim. And I wanted to say, we're all interim, we just don't know it. We have to make sure that students get what they pay for. Because they'll tell you, I pay your salary. And we could ask them for a raise. I mean, they'll tell you, I pay your salary. We have to do, if students were to leave, we have to follow them. Because there would be no university. So we have to make sure students get what they're here for. So that's our role as administrators, as presidents, as members of the cabinet, as directors and deans. We're here to serve the students.
Speaking of being in or staying out of papers, if you've read about or heard about a Howard University trustee's letter to her colleagues last year published in the Washington Post, you know that many interpreted her grievance as one focused on university finances. However, it can as easily be interpreted as having expressed a serious concern about governance. The question is, what are the ways in which governance of HBCUs, including boards of trustees and administrative personnel, impede or enhance the management of these educational corporations? What major modifications would you suggest to improve the status quo?
Judge, I think that, if you would allow me, first of all, you talked about the students. Madam President, congratulations. That's part of leadership right there. When you start a program, you don't have the students and all the stuff. The students come from everywhere. Somebody sent for the students. There are plenty of seats. There are plenty of seats right through here if you all come on down. Students, you all standing up there, plenty of seats down here. One of the things about the evolution of the institution, Judge, is that one thing that hasn't changed very much, in my opinion, is the role of the Board of Trustees. The roles of presidents have changed significantly, but the role of the board has really remained the same: to set policy, to not interfere with the daily operations of the institution, but to set policy, to assist the president in establishing the way going forward, whether it be the mission statement or the vision statement or whatever objectives we have, but to let the administration actually run the day-to-day operations, to make sure that the board provides the resources that are necessary to run the institution. But it's really very simple, and the most successful institutions that I've seen are institutions that hire a competent president, Madam President, and let the president do his or her job and provide support.
Since you referred to my board of trustees,
No, it's ours.
A few things here. I think one thing is that the issue of governance and management is not intuitive. And I think one of the errors that I think we often make, as we do in higher education in the classroom as an example, because someone gets a PhD, we then hire them to teach. We rarely ever ask them about their teaching experience. We rarely ever put them through some probationary period to see if they can teach. And more importantly, we rarely ever teach them pedagogy to make sure they know how to teach. And if you think about that hiring process, I think we do the same thing with board of trustee members. Somebody is an executive, they have a certain position in the community, and we hire them onto the board of trustee. The orientation of that board member is critical in terms of orienting that person as to what is management versus what is governance. I don't think most of what occurs because of malintent. I think it occurs because of ignorance. We have not educated everyone about what the role is, how you discharge your role, and what would constitute crossing that line. Because every time we do cross that line, we do create difficulties. Now, having said that, the relationship between the president and the board of trustees is one of the key relationships, I think, that makes the university work, and it cannot be an adversarial relationship. be a relationship that is one that's committed, that has a lot of dialogue taking place, and it has to be an ongoing relationship that builds. Every time you speak to a board of trustee member, it can't be about a crisis. That's one of the rules that I try to practice. I try to communicate with board of trustee members randomly about random things in their area of expertise. That does not always constitute a crisis, because every time you interact with someone, if it's only around an issue or crisis that needs to be solved, you get a very different relationship off the bat. The other thing is, orienting someone to an institution is extremely important. You have to take board of trustee members to classrooms, to athletic buildings, to research laboratories, so that they see and understand, especially based on what institutions they may be coming from. It may be a very different environment that you have, that you're trying to bring them in to understand the culture of what is occurring at your institution. And then the last thing I would say is...
Are you actually suggesting that they should do something other than sit in the president's box at games?
Since I've been appointed for 6 weeks, I'll leave that alone. And then the last thing I would say, especially at HBCU, since you mentioned at the top about the carousel of presidents and those types of things, my opinion about the presidency is very different. I attended Howard University in 1988, some 26 years ago, and the president at that time was a figure who was larger than life, James Cheek. What most people don't realize, most people stop me and say, well, you must be the youngest president ever. I'm not. Howard has, I'm the 17th president, and I am the 3rd youngest president ever. Howard has had 2 presidents younger than I am currently. Both of them were appointed at the age of 36, and both of them, in my opinion, were 2 of the greatest presidents, and I would flout the prudence that dictates that I probably should not identify of the 16 men who've held this job, you know, who was the greatest, but those 2 in particular had groundbreaking presidencies. They were 36 when they became president. They both, though, did not come from traditional backgrounds. One was a Baptist minister. The other was president of Fisk at the time, but had to be convinced to come to Howard. He refused to take the job initially. So when you look at the landscape when you look at the landscape of what the presidency is now, and the complicated nature of trying to be a fundraiser, you know, it's almost like trying to be a president of a country with 20 different languages. It's a complicated job. So the support you need, the board of trustees, is extremely important, because they bring a wealth of experience from different areas that you may know. I have an MBA, but I tell people all the time, I am not going to try to be the CFO of the university. That's not my job. As much as I can look at a spreadsheet, as much as I can look at the numbers, somebody else has to be responsible for that. And the chair of the finance committee has to make sure that he's guiding me. I'm not going on Wall Street and trying to trade or, you know, stock, etc., to make the university, put the university in a better position. So you need the board of trustees to really happen. And I think one of the things I hope our HBCUs will do as we go forward is to embrace that relationship, not have it be adversarial, but let's have a lot more dialogue around the relationship and around what we need to do together, so that people don't see the presidency that separate from the board of trustees. I think if people see that as a much closer relationship, then we'll get a better outcome.
Let's follow up on that a bit. On the one hand, it's obviously important for a trustee of the university to take or assume or claim some ownership in the management of the institution. You want people who feel vested and who believe that they have a stake in the university's success, and its management for that matter. Where does the ownership, and I know you can't be precise about this, but where does the ownership end? Where does the manifestation of the ownership end?
I sit on 3 corporate boards, and there is a line, there's a legal line between the board of directors and the management. I mean, it's legal. It's not something that they have an option about. The law draws that line, and you adhere to that. Shareholders, directors, managers, they all have various roles. As a member of the board, I'll use one, the bank, Pinnacle Bank, I sit on that board. I never crossed that line to go in to tell, I know my background is accounting and finance, I never went in to tell the CFO, you're doing this wrong, and here's how it should be done. That's inappropriate. And I think boards understand very well when they're crossing that line. They just elect to do it. And boards of public institutions know it very well because they've been held to that standard for a long time. Again, they elect to do it. Boards of private institutions, sometimes they're so used to being involved with the colleges and universities that it may not be as deliberate, but many times it is. But we have to understand that they make a conscious decision to do the things that they do. Now, and I know that, and I'm not saying for the papers who are listening that I have a problem with the board, because I'm really not. I'm enjoying my role as president of TSU. There are exciting initiatives that we're bringing on, and the board seems to understand at this point their role and the differences, because we have 6 public universities in the state of Tennessee. The only HBCU, of course, is Tennessee State. And so I think my issue that I'm dealing with is trying to see, it's not just add across. It's not one size fits all. It's very mission driven. And if I could change anything about this whole board process, it is a deeper understanding that each school is mission driven. And we can't just say, here are your numbers, here are your numbers, here are your numbers. And let's add them up and see what we come up with. That's not how it works. So, and the second point is, they have to understand that you're going to try some new initiatives. I'm going to give you an excellent example. You asked about what made the presidency different. Since I've been as a backup, bringing this forward now. I attended Tennessee State in the 70s. So, having come full circle, I didn't know it then, but my steps were ordered. So I'm back now as president. So, and I know that we need initiatives that we can buy into and that will help us with our retention rate and our graduation rates. So we came up with this called the book bundle, because we know that students, for whatever reason, don't buy books. They will look at their friend's book, they will share a book. I know they're out of money many times. So we said the average book costs about $175 to $200. If you got 5 classes, you're going to pay $1,000 for books. So we said, okay, students read digitally. They read on their cell phones, on their tablets, very seldom. The libraries are struggling. We all can agree. Libraries are struggling. We don't read books anymore. So we went to the book publishers and worked out a deal. Let's get all 5 of the books in the education core for $365. All books. They're digital. It was novel, and it's working. This is the first time we've tried it. So I look at my own 2 adult children. I never see them just reading a book. They're always reading online, reading a tablet. And I look at the students on campus, and that's what they're doing. So we said, okay, let's get the books, and let's give them a tablet. So this is our first time, and it is so amazing. The students are so excited to get all their books for $365 and to get a tablet for $160, which means the net effect is $200 for all your books. So the board has asked us to be the model for the state of Tennessee. Now that's the first of TSU. So the first thing I did was call my good friend Carolyn Myers at Jackson State and let her know that here's something that could be instrumental. Because the black college presidents have to stick together, especially the black women. And we have to come up with something. Let's call each other and share and say, here's what we're doing. Maybe this can help you.
No, you can call me too.
try things. I need you to step back and be the board of directors and not be the management. Let us manage and run the university, and you understand your role as basically the policy setter, i.e. / overseer, etc. But the management comes with the people you vetted, you interviewed, 3 or 4 interviews, and you select these people, the president and the others, so let us do the job as the president.
Let me also, you talked about, I think that the board and president conflict sometimes get overemphasized, mainly because, let me back up a little bit and say, I think we need to, part of being a new president in this generation is also managing different in the way you empower. Let me give you an example. As you mentioned, I've been educated at an administrative, predominantly white institutions, and this is my 21st year administration at HBCU. One of the significant differences is when a HBCU president takes over, there's an expectation that they are going to clean house. Matter of fact, the alumni, the current, they almost insist that that happens. That is rarely the case at a predominantly white institution. Very rare is there a turnover when the president changes. All right, there's not that expectation. So here's what my advice, what we need to do differently, and why we need to simply manage differently by empowering. That dynamic gets emphasized because we're not empowering our vice presidents and our deans to do their jobs. Okay, if we empowered, if we became stronger, and that's what I think a lot of us are doing now, we're empowering our teams. We're trying to make our institutions different. Right, one of the first things I did when taking over Mississippi Valley State is everything was being asked the president to opine on everything. And I'm like, why am I opining on a parking where you want parking? I mean, what? Well, that's what the president does. All right, and they were so used to dumping all of the decisions up into the president's office. The first thing I said was, oh no, we're about to dump some stuff out. Right? Because I'm not making the salaries of vice presidents and deans. I'm not going to do the job of vice presidents and deans and directors and department chairs. We have to make sure that as we build stronger HBCUs, that we hire, that we empower, that we train, that we professionally develop our senior teams and other middle management levels. Right? It is extremely important that we become more vital as organizations and insist that again in that accountability that President Glover talked about, that we insist on that at all levels. At all levels. And in turn, what's going to happen is we're going to be much stronger organizations. And if we're much stronger organizations, if we're not looking to the president's office to make all the decisions, if we've indeed empowered vice presidents and deans to make those decisions, then what happens is we become a stronger organization. And therefore, if we're a stronger organization, when a new president comes in, all of a sudden, because the board has seen, see, a lot of times back in the day, the presidents wouldn't even allow vice presidents to be around boards or to present to boards. Okay, nowadays, no, that's not the case. You've got to make sure that your vice presidents, your deans, again, are being seen as competent individuals by your board members. Right? Because again, that's going to lessen the pressure on you ultimately. If they see them.
You mean sort of like a football coach?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And again, that's extremely important for us to do because again, it's only that way we're going to be a strong organization. And if we're strong organizations, then that conflict between the board and the president is going to be that much less.
Thank you. Let's talk about a little bit about, or not a little bit, about the proverbial brain drain. Dr. Bynum, your point about not all HBCUs being the same is pertinent here. Clearly, very clearly, based upon what almost every one of you has said, the choices now available to African American high school graduates are myriad, and HBCUs are not the only alternative. And just as clearly, whether intentional or not, some of the students who perform at the high end of the academic spectrum will choose not to go to HBCUs when 40 years ago they would naturally have ended up on our campuses. I don't want to ask a really generalized question here, but the issue here is, the issue really is, so what for HBCUs? But more specifically, how has the role, I'm sorry, on the wrong question. The issue is there such a thing as brain drain as you experience it at your university? And that's particularly relevant to those of you who attended HBCUs or attended your alma mater that you now serve as president of. And what specific impact does it have if you recognize a brain drain on, one, the future of HBCUs and the way you recruit students and manage your university? Now, I'm really going to start with you this time, Dr.
Well,
Frederick.
actually,
Let me start with Dr. Frederick.
Okay.
The issue of brain drain, whether it exists or not, I think is something that we still have to react to, because we represent, I believe, 3% of all African American students who are in colleges and universities in this country, with a growing population in community colleges in particular, and folks who are signing up for online education. However, we still are responsible for 20% of the graduates that are African American from higher education institutions in this country, which means that the value proposition that we're bringing to the table is very high. And I think when we talk about competing, the outcome ultimately is what we must compete against. And if we can convince people that the number of students who are graduating from our schools and colleges is higher than anywhere else in the higher education spectrum, then I think we make a strong argument. But that value proposition has to be, again, on excellence. It cannot be simply to go because of a legacy that occurred. And our history must inform us of why. A lot of the alum I interact with from a particular era, when they tell me stories about the fact that certain states in this country paid for them to go to Howard because they would not desegregate schools and colleges, you think about what's happening today. As you pointed out earlier, these students have options, and the options are not simple. So last year, for example, we had 45 students who identified themselves as African American taking the SAT who had a perfect score, 1600. We sent letters to all of them inviting them to apply to Howard University. 22 of them applied. The prior year, 2 of them applied to Howard University because we did not try to solicit them to apply to our university. So this year we give a presidential scholarship for students who score between 1500 and 1600 on the SAT and have a GPA of 3.5 and above. And this year we have 6 of them. The point being that if we actively recruit those students and give them the value proposition, I think they will come. We often have sat back because of our history, because of how students traditionally came, as someone said earlier, where we did not have to go out and recruit them and allow those students to come to us. Now we have to go out and make a value proposition. And every time we do, they respond. So I am meeting students who the SAT score at Howard, average SAT score to get into Howard now is rising to the point where I don't think I'll get it if I apply anytime soon. And so the cohort we're getting is they're a lot more academically prepared when they come on campus with their parents. They know what they're looking for. And I would also challenge that they're not just looking for shiny buildings. That's not what they're looking for, shiny new buildings. A lot of people feel that they want to see certain types of facilities. They do, but they also want to know that they will get a great education. And I think if we give them that value proposition in the recruitment of the students, I think we can compete. And the last thing I would say, is when we use the word brain drain, I think I would like us to be careful about that. I've been at 2 majority white institutions, at University of Texas MD Anderson and at the University of Connecticut. The one thing that we must recognize is that we have to set a standard of excellence that everyone else must follow. We must stop thinking of following what we think is the standard of excellence. That's one of the things that gets us. And I think so we often speak about majority white institutions almost in an adversarial proposition, and I don't think we need to do that. I think we need to look for opportunities where we can educate them as well as we can collaborate with them in ways that allows everyone to have a better standard of of excellence. And I think if we do that and we approach it from, we have a value to bring to the table, we will do that. We have a great relationship with Johns Hopkins as an example around our cancer programs. We have collaborations with universities all over the country that are majority white institutions, and I think if we leverage those appropriately, what we consider brain drain, I think, would not be so much brain drain, but it would be an opportunity for intellectual transfer from HBCUs to the majority white institutions that we think we're competing against.
Thank you.
And actually on that one, Judge, I'll be a little controversial and make a statement that I've made before. And that statement, remember again, I'm a sociologist, and I don't want anybody to go out of here and say, well, President Bynum says blacks don't deserve civil rights, they don't deserve freedom. Oh, there you go. They don't deserve those types of things. But let me make this academic argument and this academic statement. The worst thing that happened to blacks as a race is integration. The worst thing that happened to blacks as a race was integration. Now, I'm not saying that you